That's what we did. And now I want to give you the context. The Rebbe had a minig that he took pidyanis from Chassidim Erev Rosh Hashanah. Erev Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe took pidyanis. You can't eat in class, you know that, right? I'm assuming that this is a minig from the earlier Rebbeim as well, but the Rebbe also took pidyanis Erev Rosh Hashanah. And the way I always tell the story is, the beginning of the story is lines. Did I tell you about the lines or not? Did I tell you about the lines? Yeah, the quickest line was pidyanis. The line could go from front of 770 to Brooklyn Avenue, up to President Street, wrap around till Kingston. Sometimes the end of the line was much closer to the beginning of the line than the middle of the line. In 20 minutes, all those people could go through. It was very fast because pidyanis the Rebbe was taking, not giving. He just took it from you. And the Rebbe would take the pidyon from you and he would say to you, Ksiva v'chasima toiva l'shana toiva b'sukkah, over and over again. Ksiva v'chasima toiva l'shana toiva b'sukkah. Ksiva v'chasima toiva l'shana toiva b'sukkah. There were certain people that the Rebbe would stop and talk to, but as a rule, it was just very fast. You walked by. The line was so fast that you got half the bracha. I told this all to you, right? Yeah. One person can see the same thing, so it was very, very fast. At some point, there were simply too many chassidim, so they asked that you shouldn't wait for Erev Rosh Hashanah. So there were two other times, generally, that the Rebbe took pidyanis besides for Erev Rosh Hashanah. The first was Matzah Shabbos Slichas. Matzah Shabbos Slichas starts 1 o'clock in the morning. It finishes about 45 minutes later, about 1:45 in the morning. About 1:45 in the morning, they went upstairs, he opened up his door, and people would file by. I never gave opinion Matzah Shabbos. I was never ready. To write opinion is not pashut. And people, they asked you, please write your opinion right away, so the Rebbe shouldn't have to do it all Rosh Hashanah. And whoever was able would walk by the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would take pidyanis Matzah Rosh Hashanah, Matzah Shabbos Kodesh Slichas. Then Tuesday, which is called Gimel de Slichas, Tuesday, the third day of Slichas, after Slichas, which was usually 7 o'clock in the morning, and it took about half an hour. When Slichas was over, the Rebbe went upstairs, and the Rebbe would take pidyanis. And the third time was Erev Rosh Hashanah. And they asked that only the guests who came the last minute should give Erev Rosh Hashanah, everybody else should give earlier. And people tried their best to accommodate that, of course. Now, number one, remember, every pidyon is an envelope, and inside that envelope is your pan, which has your name on it, right? However you write a pidyon. And it also has money. Money on Yom Tov is muktzah, and it was in the same envelope. And the Rebbe would open all the mail by himself. One of the most amazing things about the Rebbe was that until probably 86 or 87, mamish the last few years, the most recent few years, the Rebbe opened every piece of mail himself. The Rebbe didn't have secretaries to open his mail. If you sent the Rebbe a letter in an envelope, so they always told us that if you're bringing it into 770, don't seal it, because if you seal it, it's going to take the Rebbe a little more time to open the letter. So you would just fold it into under the flap. Every piece of mail the Rebbe opened himself. The Rebbe read every piece of letter himself. The last few years, I know this from a good source, the Rebbe let his secretaries open the mail before. They wouldn't read it, but they would cut off the bottoms of the pages, because the Rebbe used to save the scraps and bring it to the Rebbe. So the problem is this. If the pidyanis are the same envelope with money, the Rebbe cannot handle them on Yom Tov. And there's a problem. The Rebbe wants pidyanis to give for Rosh Hashanah. And I'm going to explain to you later when it comes to Tkiyas, the controversy about this, because there's arguments to be made that the Rebbe used the pidyanis on Rosh Hashanah itself. So without going into that at the moment, I'm going to get back to it later on in Mitzvah Hashem. The last couple of years, let's say starting 87, 88, something like that, they asked to come with two envelopes. One envelope was the pan, that you handed to the Rebbe, and the other envelope was the money, and that you threw into a basket. It was a big basket standing right by the Rebbe, and as you would pass the Rebbe, you would throw the money into the basket, and you would hand the Rebbe the pan with your right hand, so the Rebbe did not have to separate the pidyanis from the money, so it allowed the Rebbe to handle the pidyanis on Yom Tov. This is what they asked us to do, and of course we tried our best to do it. There's another custom, which is a very interesting custom. And that's the custom that's called pan kloli, the general pidyon. I do not know this for a fact. I don't, because I've never been able to get clear answers. I've asked people and no one's been able to tell me. I think Pan Kloli is not an old Lubavitcher minig. I think it's a new Lubavitcher minig. In other words, I don't think by the Alter Rebbe there was a Pan Kloli. I don't think by the Frierdiker Rebbe there was a Pan Kloli. Until America. I believe, and I don't know this for a fact, that the Pan Kloli idea, first of all, it's probably the brainchild of our Rebbe. It's probably his idea. And the Pan Kloli was a pidyon that all the Chassidim gave the Rebbe together. There were two basic reasons for the Pan Kloli. Number one, there were Chassidim overseas. And remember, during the Second World War, there were Chassidim in Russia who were suffering, and there were Chassidim all over Europe who were being killed in the Holocaust, who were unable to write a pidyon. So the idea of a Pan Kloli was all the Chassidim gave a pidyon nefesh to the Rebbe for all the Chassidim who could not write their own pidyon. And number two, no one wrote a pidyon for the Rebbe himself. The Rebbe is taking our pidyonis. What about the Rebbe himself? Chassidim would give the Rebbe a pidyon for the Rebbe. You see, it's a Pan Kloli. I think it was the Rebbe's idea. I don't know this for sure. I really don't. Whoever asks doesn't remember. It was started lately. In America, there was a Pan Kloli. Ban Frierdiker and Rebbe, there was a Pan Kloli. But my suspicion is it didn't exist before. The rules of the Pan Kloli were you had to be married to sign on the Pan Kloli. So I got married in 1989. The first time I signed on the Pan Kloli was Tafshin Nun Aleph, 1990, because before that they wouldn't let me. Only married people could sign on the Pan Kloli. You wrote your name, you wrote your wife's name, and there were these big, massive sheets of paper, massive, big pieces of paper, and on top there was a nusach that was written by the Gaboyim of the Pan, what we're giving to the Rebbe, the pidyon, and you would write your name, you write your wife's name, you write your children's names, and you would give money with the pidyon. Erev Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe would stand by his door, take pidyonis. The Gaboyim of the shul would walk up to the Rebbe, holding a big bag of money, all the people's money that they gave for the pidyon, and the people's chesimis that they wrote on the pidyon. So the Rebbe would stop the line. He was taking you, stop the line would stop. The Rebbe would take the pidyonis from the Gaboyim. He would read the nusach on the top. There's videos, you can see the Rebbe doing it. Then the Rebbe would look up and he would say, I apologize that I'm not reading all the names now because there's tircha de tzibur, there's people waiting, I don't want to hold people up. And he would speak a short sikh and give a bracha. This was the Seder, Pan Kloli, Erev Rosh Hashanah. So a new minig, a minig. This is I don't know how old the minig is. I think it's an American minig. I think it's from our Rebbe, that they give to the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Pan Kloli, and of course they continue by this Rebbe. But this was the Seder of Pan Kloli. Now, where are we holding? Where are we holding? Erev Rosh Hashanah was always a Fabrengen. Did I talk about this or not? If I did, tell me.
No.
The Rebbe's Nesiyos can be divided up into two periods. There's a bunch of ways to divide the Rebbe's Nesiyos up. But one of the most significant ways of dividing up the Rebbe's Nesiyos is, quote, pre-hookup and post-hookup. Do you realize that in our Rebbe's Nesiyos, there were Chassidim who never heard the Rebbe's voice? Not only the Rebbe's son, they never heard his voice. A tape recorder was a big deal in the 1950s and 60s. A telephone call was impossible. But the technology's changed. I mean, today, these things are mamash all a joke. I have a conference with a couple tonight. They're going to sit in their house, and I'm going to sit in my house. I'm going to look at each other. It's easy. It's simple. Yesterday, in time, that was impossible. It took a lot of money and a lot of machines, a whole complicated thing. Today, simulcast is nothing. Audio, video today is garnished. But as far as the Rebbe was concerned, around 1970, the content of the hookup was introduced. Which means that using a telephone line, people could hear the Rebbe's voice simultaneously all over the world. And it was a huge change in Lubavitch. Because until 1970, or whenever it started, 1970, 1972, there were stages in it. If you lived in Israel, the Rebbe made a Fabrengen, you couldn't hear what he was saying. If you were lucky, you could get a tape later, which was hard to do also. But you couldn't get Fabrengens. All of a sudden, whenever the Rebbe Fabrengs, you could be at the Fabrengen in audio. You couldn't see. You can hear the Rebbe's voice as the Rebbe is speaking. But you must understand, when the Rebbe Fabrengs 9:30 at night in New York, it's 3:30 in the morning in Kfar Chabad. So the alarm would sound. If anybody is Israeli, you know this. At 3 o'clock in the morning, literally in Kfar Chabad, the alarm would sound. Everybody would wake up. Some people came to the Fabring, and I always tell my students that the minhag ha'olam is first you wake up and then you get out of bed. I know many people get out of bed and then they wake up later. You would roll into the shul. Some guys ran to the mikveh. I was never in Kfar Chabad, so I don't have the experience. And you would hear the Fabring at 3 o'clock in the morning. That was the Seder. Once the Rebbe had a hookup, and the whole world was hearing the Fabringa simultaneously, the Rebbe was aware that people are listening to him, and he made many changes. And one of the big changes that the Rebbe made is from the time the hookup started, the Rebbe always had a Fabringa the night before a Yom Tov. The night before Rosh Hashanah, a Fabringa every year. The night before Sukkot, which happens to be the Rebbe Maras Yartzeit, Fabringen every year. And by the way, the night before Rosh Hashanah is Tzemach Tzedek's Yartzeit. Now, the night before Pesach was not a Fabringen, but Yud Aleph Nisan was a Fabringen. And Yud Aleph Nisan's Fabringen was really, the Maimer at least was a Pesach, but Derech Klal, the Maimer of Yud Aleph Nisan was a Pesach Dika Maimer, not a Yud Aleph Nisan Maimer. And the night before Shavuos is always a Fabringen. And my father told this to me. The Rebbe used to make a Fabringen the night before each Yom Tov, and he would say a Maimer. The night before Rosh Hashanah was a Maimer, the night before Sukkot was a Maimer, Yud Aleph Nisan was a Maimer, and it was a Yom, the Maimer that Rebbe said Rosh Hashanah was a Rosh Hashanah Maimer. In other words, all of a sudden, every single Yom Tov had two Maimerim. The one that he said at the end of the Yom Tov to the local crowd, which was without a mic, and the one that he said Erev Yom Tov for the whole world to hear. So there was always a Fabringen the night before Rosh Hashanah, always, in my years, from the time that there was a hookup. As you may or may not know, after the Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka passed away, there was no more weekday Fabringen, so that stopped. But until Tafshin Mem Zayin, Mem Ches was the last time, 87, every year, Erev Rosh Hashanah would be a Fabringen, and the Rebbe would say a Maimer Chassidus. In most of the years, he said it with a real niggin, with a real tune. And this was the Maimer that the Rebbe said to the whole world for Rosh Hashanah.
How many years ago?
17 years, a long time. 16 years, a long time. But the Fabringen of Rosh Hashanah had a lot of interesting features. And the one that I want to share with you, because it's my memory, is the Maizu with Paratkes. You have to understand something, girls. Growing up around the Rebbe, the hardest thing, and this is going to sound funny to you, you're not going to understand what I'm saying, go ahead.
Every year when the Fabringen, like every night before Rosh Hashanah, did the Rebbe repeat a Maimer from before, or every time was a different?
Different. All my modern were based on my mother from the earlier Rabbeim, but the Rebbe would present it a little bit differently, but it was always different. It's interesting you ask that question, because I'm reading a book about some other Rebbe who would repeat the same Titus every year. And he would look in his notebooks, and he would repeat the same things. The Chabad is a whole new Titus. Anyway, when you grow up around the Rebbe, this is going to sound weird to you, but it's really true. The hardest part of being around the Rebbe was the fact that the Rebbe was human. He was a regular person. He was so plain. It was so easy to forget who the Rebbe is, because the Rebbe made it easy. Everything about him was so pashut. He didn't. Everything was so simple. It was so simple, so efficient. The Rebbe never ever did anything that looked showy. It was completely out of his character. And you pashut could forget who it was. But you're dealing with a lakus. You're dealing with a human being. He's not just smarter than you. He's a piece of godliness. And every word out of his mouth is nevuah and ruach hakodesh. It's not to be believed. And you have to remember where you were standing. You have to remember that you're standing in the Rebbe's Dal Rabbas. He hears everybody's thoughts at the same time. You think a bad thought, the Rebbe hears it. It was pretty. The hardest part of being around the Rebbe was remembering that you're around the Rebbe. It's not just a person; it's a Rebbe. It's a lukus. Here's an example. The Rebbe made a Fabringen Erev Rosh Hashanah. Fabringen lasted, in my years, around 3 hours. It started at 9:30, by 12:30 it was done. 3 hours is a very long time for the Rebbe, very long time. He would speak 4 or 5 sichas, plus a maimed, plus he would sing the gunim, plus he would collect magbis, tzedakah money. There was a lot of things that went on. During the course of the Fabringens, the Rebbe would say whatever he needed to say. And sometimes there were long sichas, one topic for 20 minutes. And sometimes in one sikha he would jump from topic to topic. You know, he would spend 1 minute on this and 2 minutes on that. And he would say, I want to talk about this. He would just go through things. The Rebbe had a habit at Rosh Hashanah of mentioning the following story. The quote is, Yodua de Tzemach Tzedek for Pravin Paratkes in Peterburg. It's Yiddish and Russian. It is known that the Tzemach Tzedek used to play paratkis, which is a Russian word, which means something like musical chairs in Petersburg, which was the capital of Russia. That's all the Rebbe would say. Yodua ad Tzemach Tzedek pravin paratkis. But listen carefully to the story, because it's really mind-blowing. And the Rebbe said it so casually. He said it so like nothing. And he moved on to the next subject. One sentence, 15 seconds. The Chabad Rabbeim did not speak the first 24 hours of Rosh Hashanah at all. The first day of Rosh Hashanah, they didn't speak at all. At all. They just were davening and learning and tilling. Sometimes the Tzemach Tzedek would break this, so to speak, this vow of silence, and he would speak. If the Tzemach Tzedek spoke the night of Rosh Hashanah, on the first night, what did he speak about? Russian politics. Of all the things he could talk about, he didn't talk about Achei Chassidus, he didn't talk about the Alter Rebbe, he talked about Russian politics. And he would sit at his table, and he would casually say, I think this minister should lose his job, and this minister should get a better job. I think the king should be replaced. Here was the Chab Kidalach. Whatever the Tzemach Tzedek said by his table, what happened that year? You get it? A man is sitting in a shtetl that didn't have a train station, and he's saying, I think this minister should be fired, and this minister should be upgraded, and this king should be replaced. Whatever the Tzemach Tzedek said by the table, the night of Rosh Hashanah, what happened that year? It was eerie. Now, I was not by the Tzemach Tzedek's table. Tzemach Tzedek was surrounded by his children. But the Rebbe would just tell the story. Now, girls, this is not something that I heard from anybody. This I remember. I experienced this. The Rebbe would tell the story, and you look around 770, half the people are smiling. Because if the Rebbe told that story, you know that another Russian leader was going to drop dead that year, and you could take it to the bank. It happened once, it happened twice. I remember at least 3 times, maybe 4 times. They would just tell the story, and another one would die. In 1979, Brezhnev died. In 1982, Cheryenko died. In 1985, Andropov died. And the Rebbe would just tell the story, and he did it so benignly. He did it without, he didn't say, he just said like a different, you all know the story of Hurrah! Yeah, that's a dramatic story. This wasn't dramatic at all. Just tell the story. You knew somebody else would drop dead. An important man who was the same as the Tzemach Tzedek, Pravin, Paratkis, and Peterburg. I heard from people that there's a whole record, there's other stories of other leaders of other countries that would tell a story, and somebody very important in this world would quote unquote be replaced. The thing about it was, it made you appreciate what it means, the power of the Rebbe. The Rebbe acted like such a plain person, and the way he did it was without any shtick. He just made it sound, it's a tongue story. But you could take it to the bank. The Rebbe told that story, something was going to happen in the world, and it happened every time. And after it happened a number of times, you started to realize what it means that you're standing in the same room as a Rebbe. You try that. I can do everything except one thing. I can't make anybody die. I can also tell the story. The Rebbe once told a story about someone who gave a bracha to people that had children. So the Rebbe said, it's not hard to give brachas. It's hard to deliver children, The Rebbe would do this time and again. And when you experienced it, it was overwhelming. It was one of the features. It didn't happen every year. It happened occasionally. But when it happened, you would say, oh my God, so what's going to happen now? And the Rebbe in 770, you can start asking questions. How come we didn't do it earlier? How come we didn't do it more often? And why do you hire this guy and fire the other guy? When you'll be the Rebbe, you'll understand the Rebbe's business. But you stood in a room with a man that's a poshet of Alabosib in the Welt. And it was moving. It was powerful. It was just one of those things. Anyway, this is the night of Rosh Hashanah Fabrengen. That night also happens to be the yahrzeit of the Tzemach Tzedek, so that would be the Tzemach Tzedek a lot. And it was a very much a Rosh Hashanah Dik Fabrengen. Questions or comments? Now, the next day at Rosh Hashanah, this is what we're holding. Another thing that you may not realize. The Rebbe did not daven Shachris during the week with a minyan, period. The Rebbe daven Shachris, Shabbos and Yom Tif, always with the Olam, with the people, including Chol Hamoed. But a regular weekday, the Rebbe davened in his room. Even Reish Chodesh, the Rebbe davened without a minyan. He was by himself. The Rebbe told me not to tell you. He said, I'm going to come to seminary, I'm going to don't tell him. I'll tell you the reason, but don't tell the girls. So I can't tell you, so I have to tell you. I have no idea why the Rebbe did it. Mincha might have always with a minyan, always. Even if the Rebbe came late from the oil, either he davened with everybody or he would ask 10 people to wait for him daven in his room. Mincha might have always with the minyan. Shachris, the Rebbe davened lyhadus during the week. After the Rebbe and Achei Temimim passed away, the Rebbe started davening Shachris also with the minyan. He would come downstairs, and davening changed. The earlier time for davening was 9:30 in the morning, and it changed to 10 o'clock. But the Rebbe, after the Rebbe and Achei Temimim passed away, he davened every tefillah with the oil. Before that, he davened Shachris b'yechidus, which means that a boy like me, who was born in 1965 and grew up in the late 70s and 80s, almost never saw the Rebbe Tassen Tefillin. When was the Rebbe wearing tefillin in public? Purim, Tisha B'Av to Mincha, and 3 yard sites: Vav Tishrei, Yud Shvat, and Chav Av. Those are the only times the Rebbe davened Shachris with the minions of the Rebbe Tassen Tefillin. But there were 2 more exceptions. And I don't know the reasons for this, just like I told you the Rebbe told me I shouldn't tell you the other thing, I shouldn't tell you this either. There were 2 other days that the Rebbe davened with the minion every year. Erev Rosh Hashanah and Erev Yom Kippur. I don't know why. But Erev Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe davened with the minyan, and Erev Yom Kippur, the Rebbe davened with the minyan. Who's the Seder by the Rebbe? Always. Erev Rosh Hashanah, we don't say Tachanun. This is just general information. Erev Rosh Hashanah and Erev Yom Kippur, we don't say Tachanun. Of course, we also don't blow shofar. And the Rebbe davened with the minyan. So the night before they would announce Erev Rosh Hashanah Slichus is long. In most of the years that I remember, it was 7 o'clock in the morning. After the Rebbe passed away, they changed it to 9 o'clock in the morning, and the Rebbe complained about it. But Slichus, for the most part, was 7 o'clock in the morning. So 7 o'clock was Slichus, 8 o'clock Slichus, the Rebbe would leave the room. I'm trying to remember if the Rebbe went to the mikveh before Shachris. Erev Yom Kippur, I believe the Rebbe went to the mikveh before Shachris. Erev Rosh Hashanah, I don't remember. And after Slichus, the Gabi would announce Shachris Vedzayin Vedzayin Grade. Shachris is going to be whenever we're ready. In other words, he didn't even announce a time. The Rebbe should be able to decide. And the Rebbe came into Shachris whenever he was ready, Erev Rosh Hashanah. And there was a regular minyan, the regular davening, nothing special. The unusual feature of the davening of Erev Rosh Hashanah is called Ataras Nedarim. And this is one of the things that I'll never understand why girls don't do it. It doesn't make any sense. There's no difference between boys and girls when it comes to the Nedarim and Ataras Nedarim. The only truth is that we do Kol Nidre. Kol Nidre is the same thing as the Taras Nedarim, and the girls say Kol Nidre with a minyan, and they're holding Sifrei Torah, so there is a Bezdin, Dayanim. But the only reason to explain why women don't do Kol Taras Nedarim is because it's hard for women to get out of Rosh Hashanah to get 10 men to sit and listen to them read. Taras Nedarim requires 10 men, it doesn't require, but the minhag is 10 men who sit, and they're the court, and you stand and you read. You're releasing all your vows. You made a promise and you weren't careful that you're not mechuyev to keep the vow. Nobody likes to sit in the presence of the Rebbe, especially when the Rebbe is standing looking at you. So they put down a bunch of chairs behind the Rebbe, and all the Rabbanim would stand on these chairs. And you would watch the Rabbanim, they waited till the last second. The Rebbe would turn around, and mamash at the last second they would sit down. Some of them you could see they pushed it, but not allowing them to sit comfortably on the chair. And the Rebbe was wearing his talis and film. There's many pictures of this. We hold his siddur, and he would read the whole nusach of, I want to release all my vows. It's a whole Megillah. It's many, many words. And when the Rebbe finishes, they answer 3 times. Machalach, whatever, they forgot the Lashenis already. They have to answer, and we forgive you. It's atonement. It's 4 paragraphs. First the person reads, then the Dayanim read, then the person reads, and the Dayanim read again. And the Rebbe would do Ataras Nedarim. Didn't take long, there's tapes of it. The minute the Rebbe was done, they would pop back up, because they didn't want to sit in front of the Rebbe for 1 second. The Rebbe also, when you did Ataras Nedarim, would always say a pruzbul. A pruzbul means Hareini Meisa Lechem Kol Cheves Sheyesh Li She'eg Be'esed Kol Zman She'eretz. That if you have any loans, the halach is when Shemitah comes, your loans are annulled. They don't have to be paid back. A pruzbul is that you give your loans to the Bezdin, and loans that belong to the Bezdin can be collected. So you gave your loans to the Bezdin, and you can collect them. So the beginning of Shemitah and the end of Shemitah, twice. The Abi Allah is the end of Shemitah. The Rebbe was makbid to do it twice. You say 5 words. Hareini Meisa Lechem Kol Cheves Sheyesh Li She'eg Be'esed Kol Zman She'eretz. That's 12 words. And then the Rebbe would say thank you, and he would leave. The Rebbe went upstairs. The Rebbe took Pidyanis. Erev Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe always went to the oil. Always went to the oil. And it was one of the, girls, you guys go to the oil all the time. When I was a kid growing up, we never went to the oil. We had no business for oil. We had to oil for it. But Erev Rosh Hashanah we all went. Yud Shvat we all went, and some people went other days also. But you didn't go to the oil much. When the Rebbe went to the oil, Beklal, he was there alone. Erev Rosh Hashanah was from the rare occasions the Rebbe came to the oil. And I don't know if you've seen the pictures. They built the Rebbe a room. When you guys go to the oil, there's a wall around the oil and you can walk all the way around. You know what I'm talking about? There used to be a little wall, a little booth at the far end of the oil, opposite the Frierdiker Rebbe's matzeva. And the Rebbe would go into that room. That room had heating. The room had air conditioning. I think it also had a roof. But I think when the Rebbe would use it, he would take the roof off. And it was a little more comfortable for the Rebbe. He had a place to put his bag down. That room was not built till the mid-1960s. For the first 10, 15 years, the Rebbe went to the oil. He would hold the bag the whole time. Hold his bag for 3-4 hours and take out letters. At some point, Rabbi Groner became the holder of the bag, and the Rebbe would take it. The Rebbe pushed himself. What the Rebbe did to his own body is, the amount that the Rebbe pushed himself is absolutely abnormal, not normal at all. And so the Rebbe went to Rosh Hashanah. He came back very late, maybe an hour before Yom Tov. He would go home, Pasha, for a few minutes, and you have to assume that the Rebbe had eaten all day long. The Rebbe hadn't eaten. Because before oil, you don't eat. You're supposed to drink before oil, but you're not supposed to eat before oil. It's another whole conversation. Don't ask me about going oil at night, because I'm going to tell you what I think, and you're not going to like what I say, so don't ask me. But the Rebbe didn't eat when he went to oil. A kid said, the Rebbe came back at 7:70, and he's getting ready for Rosh Hashanah. I heard this from people who know this. This is unofficial information. The Rebbe had in his home on President Street a number of artifacts, items of clothing that belonged to the earlier Rabbeim. Like a yarmulke from one Rebbe. The Rebbe had a gadol that was white silk that belonged to the Tzemach Tzedek. The different garments that he had in his house. Those, Of course, but I don't know whether in the Rebbe's home or they're in the library, but of course they have them. And the Rebbe used to bring him to seven. I can't hear you.
The Rebbe always wear the same ones.
Of these special artifacts, whatever he had.
That's saying did he always wear the same?
I'm talking about clothing that belonged to the earlier Rebbe. What is your question? But the Rebbe's own clothing, Bechlali wore the same. On Yom Kippur, the Rebbe had an old talis, this I can tell you. Bechlali, the Rebbe's talis was new and beautiful. Yom Kippur, the Rebbe had a different talis, an old, very yellow talis. But he didn't wear it Rosh Hashanah, just Yom Kippur. It's interesting.
What's the thing that like by weddings people wear like the Rebbe's coat or something? Like the white.
So what about that? What's the question?
Where does that come from?
Let's save it for another time. I owe you an answer. Don't apologize, but it's not for right now. The Rebbe had in his home a handful of clothing. It probably was 3 or 4 things. It wasn't a lot. But it was very precious to him. He kept it in the house. He didn't keep it in his room. Before Rosh Hashanah, he brought the 770. It stayed in his room from before Rosh Hashanah till after Yom Kippur. Then he would take it back home. And he would wear it to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Rabbi Groner was sitting Shiva once for his sister. And he said to me, I saw the Rebbe put on the Tzemach Tzedek gadol on his shirt. Before the Rebbe put on his kapota, on his shirt, he put on the white gadol. He wore different clothing from the different Rabbeim that were very special to him, only Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rabbi Yael Khan writes in his journal that the Rebbe, a whole Rosh Hashanah, was walking around with a kerchief around his neck that must have belonged to an earlier Rebbe. I don't remember that, but apparently the Rebbe wore different items of clothing that the Rebbe had that belonged to the earlier Rebbeim. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Rebbe used to wear them. So the Rebbe came back to 770, I don't know, but he brought them to 770. Now, there's a tradition that goes back till the Alter Rebbe. We have till 25. Till 25. Well, the Rabbeim, Chabad, the Rebbe's talked about Avodas Tefillah. You know that. The Rabbeim talked about davening. And davening long, and davening with kavanah, and davening with his bonus. When our Rabbeim davened, Bariches, if they could, they would daven in short. The minute people started to ogle them, to look at them, in other words, I'm davening and someone's watching me, the Rebbe davened in his house. The Rebbe didn't want people watching him. So in the early years of each Rebbe, when the crowd was still small and nobody was paying attention, the Rebbe would daven in shul. The minute the Rebbe became more famous and people wanted to look at him, he would daven in his house. So the Rebbeim, if they daven in public, they daven more or less with a minyan, although that's a little bit vague. If they wanted to daven a special davening, they would do it in the privacy of their own home. People shouldn't bother them. The exception was not Rosh Hashanah. The night of Rosh Hashanah, all the Rabbeim, from the Alter Rebbe on, would daven in public, b'bchiyas. They would cry like there was no tear ducts left. They would cry till there's no tears in their tear ducts. The Rabbeim would daven Ma'ariv for 3-4 hours. Ma'ariv for 3-4 hours. They would start with the minyan. The minyan starts, let's say, 7 o'clock, and they'd finish at 10:30. And when he was finished, there was a puddle of tears, I understand that. A puddle of tears. The Rabbeim, the night of Rosh Hashanah was, people came to the Rebbe for the davening, not for the tkiyas, for the davening of Rosh Hashanah. It was a very special event. So Yisrael Gordon, Olav Shalom, told us that you were allowed to be present when the Frierdiker, he saw the Frierdiker Rebbe do this in America. You were allowed to be present when the Frierdiker Rebbe davened, but you had to say Tillim. You're not allowed to waste your time. So the Olam stood around, the Rebbe davened, and you said Tillim, but you know how you said Tillim. You said a pasuk, looked at it for 5 minutes, and another you were the Rebbe davened. When the Frierdiker passed away, and the Rebbe became Rebbe, all the Bachar were thinking that they're going to stand near the Rebbe, and they're going to hear the Rebbe daven like this. And the Rebbe davened with a minyan. He didn't do it. The Rebbe broke this custom. The Rebbe davened with a minyan. Now, why and what and where and when and how, this is into the shaylas, but the Rebbe davened with a minyan. So this idea that the Rebbeim davened in public with so much emotion for so many hours, our generation did not see it. Whatever the Rebbe's reasons were, but this is the fact that Rebbe stopped this minhag. He didn't do it. But I will tell you this: the Rebbe davened b'chlal with fast. The Rebbe used to finish Manasseh before many people. The Rebbe davened fast. Rosh Hashanah, the first night, we waited for the Rebbe. He didn't daven for 3 hours. He didn't cry. He had no more tears in his ducts. But we finished Ma'ariv. We waited for the Rebbe. We waited for the Rebbe we waited for quite a while, 5 minutes, let's say. The Rebbe davened the first night, Rosh Hashanah longer. Well, the Rebbe was busy with, but the Rebbe davened longer than Rosh Hashanah. But that was it. There was nothing special to see the first night of Rosh Hashanah. So what is the predominant feature of Rosh Hashanah? The thing that people talk about. When they talk about Rosh Hashanah by our Rebbe, by the earlier Rebbeim, you would have talked about the davening. By our Rebbe, the davening was more or less like everybody else. The feature of Rosh Hashanah was Tkiyah Shofar. The Rebbe blew shofar all the years. And it probably was the most pushy time in 770. Tkiyah, the pressure was unbelievable. Because Tkiyah Shofar, you had to have two things. You had to see and hear. Sometimes you can see the Rebbe, you don't have to hear him, like by Hakafas. Sometimes you have to hear the Rebbe, you don't have to see him, like by Fabringen. But Tkiyah, you wanted to see and hear, and there was not enough space for everybody. So real estate in 770 was at a premium. And never was real estate in 770 more at a premium than the morning of Rosh Hashanah if you wanted to have a Tkiyah. To see the Rebbe and hear the Rebbe saying Tkiyah. So a long, long time ago, before I could remember, if you wanted a good spot for Tkiyas, you would come at night and you would stay in shul all night. Guys used to sleep in shul, literally sleep in shul so they can get a good spot for Tkiyas. At some point, the Vada Masada decided that it's better that people should have regular places. When I was growing up in 770, it was a concept called Machon Gevurim, regular places. That idea was introduced by the secretaries, by the people in charge of the shul, because on a Friday night before of Shabbat, the Bachim were bringing 40 Bachim slept on benches. And everybody was sleeping on 770 benches. Not fun. It's not fun. So now, the problem with regular places was mostly for guests. Guests came in, they didn't even know the rules. They didn't even know that there nothing as regular places, and then they didn't understand why it wasn't fair. But a decision was made, I don't know when, that it's better that there should be regular places, and the guests will have to figure out what to do, than people sleeping on benches, and there'd be fights. You know what I'm saying? If everybody, every time has to grab a spot, two guys come to the same spot together, so they made these rules, that you have to have regular places. But, if you wanted to get your regular space, you had to show up before to claim it. So the morning of Rosh Hashanah, if you came into 770 at 7:45 Rosh Hashanah morning, there were 300 Bachim in shul. It was full. All the Bachim came, they took their spots, and they said to the neighbor, you see me, I'm here. If you walked in 775 after 8, the room was empty. Because you had to be in your place before 8 o'clock. If you were in your place before 8 o'clock, and people saw you, your place was yours, and the Bachim went on Miftzayim. So imagine you're an Israeli, or you're French, and you come to 770 3 minutes after 8 in the morning on Rosh Hashanah. Ooh, I get the best spot in the house. Well, you don't know that 5 minutes before the room was full. And those guys are going to come back and reclaim their places, and either you're going to be pushed back or you're going to have a fight.
Why did he come in?
Because he didn't know the rules. He didn't know the rules. Huh?
Where the other
They went on Miftzayim. They left. You came before 8 o'clock. You took your space. 8 o'clock they would leave. That was the Seder.
And then why did that happen? For what?
He wanted a spot for Tchiyas. But he didn't know the protocol. If you didn't know the rules, 770, you had to know the rules. The guests did quite well. Don't worry about it. First of all, there was an Israeli mafia, there was a French mafia, there was an Israeli mafia. They helped each other. They figured out how to deal with this problem. But that was the Seder. Guys used to go on Miftzayim. 10 o'clock was Shachris. Throughout Shachris, literally till Kriyas HaTorah, means 10, 11, 15, Bacham are coming back from Miftzayim. They're pushing through to their places. Now, most people who knew the rules knew, okay, this is your place, go. Sometimes you met the wrong kind of guys, it became interesting in 770. But that was the Seder. To see and hear Tkiyas was hard and rare and special, and it was an opportunity. If you were Zoicha to see and hear Tkiyas, you were lucky. What can I tell you? You were very, very lucky. I do want to tell you this. This is very important for me to say. I think it's important for you to hear also. I want you to know that for the most of the years that I remember, till the very late 80s, girls, 770 was quiet. 770 was so quiet you could hear the chazan in the back of the shul. In the very late 80s, 88, 89, 90, 770 had a hum of noise the whole time. And they were complaining about it. And the reason it was noisy is there were too many people and not enough space. I don't know if you've had the experience. Imagine davening shachas in this position. Hold on, 2 hours like this. Yeah? Your back is breaking, so you want to straighten up. But what does it take for you to straighten up? The guy near you's got to do this. There was pushing, not enough space. So there was pushing. It wasn't done to hurt people. There were more bodies than there were inches in 770, and there became this hum of noise. And the Rebbe once turned around in the middle of davening and asked that they should announce that it should be quiet. And he added, but they should announce to be quiet loud enough that they should hear that the announcement is being made. That's how much noise there was. But that was mamish the last couple of years, maybe 86, not earlier. When I was a kid growing up, and even when I was a bacher, 770 was quiet. People had respect. They knew where they were. It left the pariyot. It wasn't because people left respect. There was too many people. There was not enough room in the room for all the people who filled the room. It was very difficult. 10 o'clock in the morning with the shachris. Now, another thing. I only have 5 minutes, so I'll see how I'm going to get through this. I may have to leave this for the next time. The night of Rosh Hashanah, after Ma'ariv, the Rebbe went upstairs, went into his room and sat down at his desk. The Rebbe did not sit much at his desk, for those who do not know. The desk that the Rebbe sat at, the Friedrich Rebbe also sat at. So B'klal, the Rebbe did not sit behind his desk, he sat on the side. The night of Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe came into his room and sat by his desk. The secretaries would come into the Rebbe's room and they would prepare what is called in Lubavitch the peklach, that means the packages. It's one of the parts of the Lubavitch tradition is the packages. Depending on who you ask, you'll get different answers, and I don't think they're necessarily contradictory answers. I think it depends on the years. The Rebbe used to come to Tkiyas with bags. What they were, have you ever seen a 2-pound package of matzah wrapped in paper rather than in cardboard? Ever seen it?
Yeah.
It's a brown piece of paper folded and tied with a string. That's what it looked like. It was a brown piece of paper, big piece of brown paper, folded and tied with string, with letters inside, not matzahs. And the Rebbe had, the years that I remember, the Rebbe always had 3 of them. I read sometimes he had 4, and sometimes even had 5. The night of Rosh Hashanah, they would sit by his table and say Tillim. The secretaries walk in and they would prepare the packages on Yom Tov, which meant that they had to tie the string with a bow. They couldn't tie it with a knot because it was on Yom Tov. The Rebbe said Tillim, and they prepared the packages. The question is, what went into those packages? So Leibel Groner says, Rabbi, who was the Rebbe's secretary from the very beginning, that those packages went to Pidyanis of Erev Rosh Hashanah. Now, you have to think what that means. You walk by the Rebbe at 11 o'clock in the morning, Rosh Hashanah, they took your pidyon. Your pidyon was in an envelope with money. The Rebbe spent most of that afternoon by the oil. When did the Rebbe have time to take the pidyanis out of the envelopes and put them in a separate place so that at night they can go into the peklach? When? I don't know. But apparently, the Rebbe first became a Rebbe. That's what the Rebbe did. Because the Rebbe first became a Rebbe, he probably got a couple of hundred pidyanis. He would open the envelopes, separate the money from the pagainas, and put them in the peglach. By the time I was growing up, there wasn't taking hundreds of pagainas, he was taking thousands of pagainas. There was no time. So Rabbi Klein, who happens to be my wife's uncle, who was also a secretary of the Rebbe, but he was later, told me a different story. He told me the Rebbe did not put the pagainas into the peglach because the Rebbe did not have time to take the pagainas out of the envelopes that were connected with the money. But the Rebbe had in his room a bag. This is an interesting thing to know. If you worked with the Rebbe, yeah? If you were the Rebbe's secretary, the Rebbe's room was a mess. It was a mess. There were sforim all over the place, piles of books and papers all over the place. And the Rebbe had bags. You know what means a bag? 2 feet by 3 feet. Mamish, the size of a child. Massive bags. Big bags of paper bags, heavy-duty paper bags. And the Rebbe used to bring them to Fabrengens when he took Magbi, he used to take them to the oil. In the Rebbe's room, there must have been 20 of those bags, just sitting. Here. Girls, if you worked, this is so interesting to understand. If you worked in the Rebbe's room, you didn't move a bag from here to here. The Rebbe's secretaries didn't move anything in the Rebbe's room. They swept the floor. In order to with the Baal Shem Tov, the kiddu swept around the shoes. That's how it was by the Rebbe. The Rebbe's secretaries did not help him. They served him. If they put a bag here, it stayed there. Could be 2 years later, the bag is still sitting there. You didn't touch it. In the Rebbe's room, you didn't touch anything. The Rebbe knew where everything was. And if you're going to start moving the Rebbe's stuff about, it's like my cleaning lady who puts my things away and I can't find them. Thank you very much. And you can tell her 40 times don't do it, that she doesn't understand English. In the Rebbe's room, he didn't touch things. He had all these bags. And when the Rebbe went to the oil, he took one of the bags. And the Rebbe knew what he was doing, but none of the secretaries understood what's going on. The Rebbe had a bag. This is what Klein told me. Rabbi Klein told me. All year, the Rebbe saved letters. How the Rebbe made this decision doesn't know. All year, the Rebbe saved letters. Those letters that the Rebbe saved the whole year went into these pekla. So I heard one thing from Rabbi Groner, personally. Another thing from Rabbi Klein, personally. One said that the pekla had pigetis. The other said the pekla had letters that the Rebbe would save all year. Who's right? They're both right. My guesstimate is that in the first years the Rebbe had the pigetis. But as the crowd grew and the Rebbe's time was more limited, he probably did it this way. The bottom line is when the Rebbe came to davening, Shabbos, Rosh morning, he came with these peklach. They were prepared the night of Yom Tov. So after Ma'ariv, the Rebbe went into his room, he sat down to say Tillim, and the secretary would prepare these packages. This was the Seder of Rosh Hashanah. When the Rebbe came into Shul Shabbos, I've been ignoring this play the whole time, it's finished. When the Rebbe came into Shul Shabbos morning, here's what happened. In his right hand, the Rebbe was holding a shmatas, cloth. Inside these shmatas, the Rebbe always had 3 shofars, which he took to Tekiyas. In his left hand, the Rebbe held 2 or 3 siddurim. The first siddur was one he davened with. The second siddur was the siddur with Chassidus. I'll explain to you why from the Alter Rebbe later. And the third, sometimes the Rebbe also brought a siddur from the Arizal. All this I'll talk about later on. Behind the Rebbe walked the Rebbe's shadow. Trivia question. If you're a good Lubavitcher, you should know the answer to this question. Who is the Rebbe's shadow? Anybody? Rabbi Chadakov. Rabbi Chadakov. You can't even write a book about Rabbi Chadakov. You know why? He was literally the Rebbe's shadow. He was always with the Rebbe. He was the closest person in the world to the Rebbe. He served the Rebbe, but he was like he wasn't there. When the Rebbe walked in and out of shul, he was always behind the Rebbe. By Fabrengen, by that he followed the Rebbe. It was his Seder. The other secretaries, Rabbi Groner and Rabbi Klein, would normally not follow the Rebbe. They'd go before. But Rosh Hashanah, they walked behind Rabbi Chadakov. They held these bags. So the Rebbe is walking, holding shafis and tzedurim. Rabbi Chadakov, in the years that I remember him, was trying to keep up. He was already elderly. And behind Rabbi Chadakov is Rabbi Groner holding these packages. They went up to his place. He would open up the doors to his shtendit and put the shafis in. He'd put the sedurim on top of the shtendit and davening would begin. The secretaries would go up onto the Rebbe's bimah, and there was a little table with a tablecloth on top, and they'd put down these packages. These were the packages that the Rebbe brought with him to Tekiyas. And we will continue to Mitzvah Hashem on Thursday.